Ryan Mercer stands in a glittering ballroom, black suit perfectly cut, expression carved from stone. Until a little girl in a floral dress and pink bow crashes through the crowd, screams, "Mama!" and throws herself into the arms of the woman he once walked away from. And in that instant, the billionaire who thought he could buy everything finally sees the one thing money can't fix staring back at him with his own eyes. He remembers the night he pushed Nia Brooks out of his penthouse and out of his life. The way her voice shook when she whispered she wanted a real family, and the way he killed that dream with one sentence: "I want a child, but not with you." And as you're listening, ask yourself, if you would never throw away the mother of your child just to protect your ego, hit that subscribe button right now. But if you think a promotion is worth more than a person's heart, you can go ahead and skip this story because Ryan did that. And tonight, karma walked into the room on tiny legs. Ryan Mercer didn't believe in second chances, only in calculated risks that paid dividends. The boardroom smelled like leather and desperation. 14 executives seated around a table carved from Brazilian walnut, each one waiting for Ryan to speak. He didn't. Silence was the sharpest tool in his arsenal, and he wielded it now, watching grown men shift in their seats like children caught cheating on a test. The quarterly numbers were bleeding red. The media was circling like sharks, and someone in this room had leaked internal documents to a competitor. Ryan leaned back in his chair, his black suit immaculate, his expression carved from ice, and let the tension stretch until it became unbearable. "Gentlemen," he finally said, his voice low and precise, "you're approaching this wrong." The head of operations opened his mouth, but a voice cut through first. "Actually, you're approaching this wrong." Every head turned. A woman stood near the back wall, posture relaxed, but eyes sharp as broken glass. She wore a black dress that somehow made everyone else in the room look like they were trying too hard, her natural hair styled perfectly, her presence filling the space without apology. Nia Brooks, the crisis consultant his board had hired without consulting him. Ryan raised an eyebrow, the only indication of surprise he'd allow. "Excuse me. You're treating a human problem like a data problem," Nia said, moving toward the table with measured steps. "You can't algorithm your way out of a trust crisis. People don't care about your quarterly projections. They care whether you're human enough to admit when you're wrong." "And you're an expert on being human?" Ryan asked, his tone carrying just enough edge to make the room hold its breath. "I'm an expert on what happens when powerful men think the rules don't apply to them," Nia replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Which, from where I'm standing, is exactly your problem." The silence that followed was different now. No one spoke to Ryan Mercer like that. No one dared. Ryan studied her, waiting for her to look away the way everyone eventually did. She didn't. She just stood there like she had all day and nothing to lose, which made her either very brave or very dangerous. "Everyone out," Ryan said quietly. The executive scrambled for the door, grateful for the escape. Nia remained exactly where she was, unfazed. When the door clicked shut, Ryan stood, closing the distance between them. "You're either fearless or reckless." "I'm expensive," Nia said, "which means I don't waste time on flattery or fear." Despite himself, Ryan smiled. It had been years since anyone had surprised him. "Fair enough. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. Besides trying to intimidate me?" Nia walked to the windows overlooking the city. "You've built an empire, Mr. Mercer. But you've forgotten that empires need foundations, not just profit margins." Ryan moved to stand beside her, close enough to catch the subtle scent of her perfume. And what foundation am I missing? She turned to face him fully. Trust. Humanity. The part of you that remembers what it was like before you became untouchable. Something in her voice, not pity, not judgment, just truth, cracked something open in Ryan's chest that he thought he'd sealed shut years ago. Over the following weeks, Naya became a constant presence. She sat in on emergency meetings, challenged every decision Ryan made with surgical precision, and refused every attempt he made to charm his way back into control. It was infuriating. It was fascinating. He started finding excuses to work late, knowing she'd be there, hunched over strategy reports in the glass-walled office his board had assigned her. Sometimes he'd stand outside her door, watching her work through the reflection, trying to understand what made her different from everyone else who orbited his world. She caught him watching one evening, looked up from her laptop, and raised an eyebrow. Ryan had the decency to look embarrassed before walking away. The next night, she left her office door open. An invitation, maybe, or a challenge. Ryan accepted it as both. "Let me guess," Nia said, without looking up when he appeared in her doorway well past midnight. "You can't sleep." "How'd you know?" "Because you're standing outside my office at 1 a.m. instead of being home." Ryan stepped inside without invitation, sat in the chair across from her desk. "Do you ever stop working?" "Do you?" "Touché." He ran a hand through his hair, the carefully maintained composure slipping. "Can I ask you something?" Nia closed her laptop, giving him her full attention. "That depends on the question. Why aren't you afraid of me?" She considered this, her expression thoughtful. "Because fear and respect aren't the same thing. You want people to fear you because it's easier than earning their respect. But fear doesn't build loyalty, Ryan. It builds resentment." "That's not an answer." "Yes, it is." Naya leaned back in her chair. "You're not scary. You're lonely. And lonely people lash out because they don't know how to reach out." The words hit like a physical blow. Ryan had spent years perfecting his armor, and she just pointed out every crack with terrifying accuracy. "I'm not lonely," he said, though the lie tasted bitter. "Okay." "I said okay." Nia smiled for the first time since he'd met her, and something in Ryan's chest tightened. "You need more truth in your life, not less." They sat in silence for a moment, the city lights glittering through the windows behind her. Ryan found himself telling her things he'd never told anyone. About the father who'd called him weak for wanting to study music instead of business. About building his first company from nothing and the emptiness that came with every zero added to his net worth. About the fear of being ordinary that drove him to become extraordinary, and the price he'd paid for it. Nia listened without trying to fix him, without offering platitudes or solutions. She just heard him, really heard him. And somehow, that was more valuable than anything else she could have given. "You're good at this," Ryan said as dawn broke over the city, turning the sky from black to amber. "At what?" "Making people feel less alone." Nia's expression turned sad. "That's because I know what alone feels like." Somewhere around sunrise, the conversation stopped being words and became something else. A hand on a hand. A moment where the world outside ceased to exist. Ryan kissed her softly, expecting her to pull away. She didn't. "This is a terrible idea," Nia whispered against his mouth. "Probably," Ryan said, pulling her closer. They moved to his penthouse as the city woke up around them. Two people who'd been alone so long they'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen. Morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ryan's penthouse, turning everything golden and soft. Nia stood at the counter wearing one of his shirts, her natural hair caught in the sunlight, making coffee like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Ryan watched her from the doorway, something unfamiliar tightening in his chest. Contentment, maybe. Or terror disguised as something warmer. "I made breakfast," Nia said without turning around. Or what passes for breakfast when your kitchen only has protein powder and expensive whiskey. Ryan moved closer, slipping his arms around her waist. "I don't usually have guests," I noticed. She turned in his arms, her expression softer than he'd ever seen it. "Ryan, we should talk about what this is." The unfamiliar feeling in his chest sharpened into panic. Ryan released her, reaching for his coffee cup like it was armor. "What do you mean?" "I mean, last night wasn't casual for me." Nia held his gaze, brave and vulnerable at once. "I don't do this. I don't sleep with clients. I don't blur lines. But with you, I wanted to. Because I thought maybe we could build something real." "Real," Ryan repeated, the word tasting foreign on his tongue. "Yes, real." Nia set down her own cup, her hands trembling slightly. "I'm 33 years old, Ryan. I want a partnership, marriage eventually, a family, a child who knows both parents love them. I want something that matters more than quarterly reports and reputation management." The panic exploded into full-blown fear. Ryan felt the walls he'd spent years building slam back into place with brutal efficiency. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to shut this down, to protect himself from the terrifying possibility of being ordinary, of being trapped, of being vulnerable enough to be hurt. "You're confusing intimacy with ownership," Ryan said, his voice cold and clinical, the CEO mask sliding back on with practiced ease. Nia's hands stilled. The warmth between them turned to ice so fast Ryan could feel it crystallizing in the air. "What did you say?" Ryan's brain screamed at him to stop, to take it back, to say anything else. But his pride, that vicious, wounded pride, had already taken control. "I'm Ryan Mercer. You're a consultant I hired. We had one night. That doesn't entitle you to a future." "Entitle me?" Nia's voice was dangerously calm. "I want a legacy, Nia." Each word was a nail in his own coffin. "I want to build something that lasts. I want a child, eventually, an heir to everything I've built. But not with someone who thinks one night means forever. I want a child, but not with you." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of every possibility dying in real time. Nia stood perfectly still for 3 seconds that felt like hours. Then she set down her coffee cup with deliberate care, walked to the bedroom without a word, and began gathering her things. "Nia," Ryan started, his voice cracking on her name. "Don't." She held up one hand, still not looking at him. "Don't try to soften it now. You made yourself perfectly clear." She dressed in silence, every movement controlled and dignified. When she reached the door, she finally turned to face him, and Ryan wished she hadn't. The hurt there was brief, a flash of lightning before the storm. What replaced it was worse. Nothing. Absolute emptiness. "I hope whatever you're protecting in that fortress is worth it," Nia said quietly. "Because it looks pretty lonely from where I'm standing." The door closed with a soft click that echoed louder than a slam ever could. Nia's resignation letter arrived on Ryan's desk 3 hours later. Professional, brief, completely devoid of emotion. It said nothing and everything at once. She was requesting immediate release from her contract due to personal circumstances requiring relocation. No forwarding address, no explanation, no second chance. Ryan read it 17 times, waiting for the relief to come, for the satisfaction of maintaining control, of protecting himself, of winning whatever twisted game his mind had convinced him they were playing. Nothing came. Just a hollow ache in his chest that felt suspiciously like loss. He approved the resignation immediately because making her stay would be another form of cruelty, and he'd already inflicted enough. 4 weeks later, Nia sat on the bathroom floor of her new apartment 3 states away, back against cold tile, pregnancy test trembling in her hand. 2 pink lines stared back at her like an accusation and a promise wrapped into one. She wasn't crying. That surprised her. She'd expected tears, panic, the overwhelming sense of being trapped that every movie promised. Instead, she felt oddly calm, centered even. A child. His child, their child. No, her child. The distinction mattered. Nia had spent weeks waiting for regret to find her, waiting to second-guess her decision to walk away from a man who clearly needed her more than he'd ever admit. The pull never came, because what she'd felt for Ryan hadn't been love, not yet. It had been potential, possibility, the ghost of what they could have been if he'd been braver. But he wasn't brave, and she wasn't interested in raising 2 children. She stood, catching her reflection in the mirror. Same dark eyes, same strong features, same woman who'd walked out of a penthouse with her dignity intact. But something was different now. Something fundamental had shifted. She was going to be someone's mother. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Over the following days, Nika built a fortress of her own, not made of money or power, but of decisions. She told no one about Ryan, listed no father on preliminary medical forms, created a story so simple it was almost true. She'd wanted a child, chosen to have one, and was doing this alone. When people asked questions with their eyes more than their mouths, Nia answered with a smile that didn't invite follow-up. She pulled out her phone one last time, stared at Ryan's contact information, and whispered to the child growing inside her. He made his choice. Now I'm making mine. She blocked his number, deleted every email, erased every trace of him from her digital life. Then she placed both hands on her still flat stomach and made a promise that felt sacred and unbreakable. Your name will be Michaela, she whispered. And you're going to be so loved, baby girl. So wanted. You'll never have to beg for someone's attention or wonder if you're worth their time. Ryan Mercer had chosen his fortress. Nia was choosing her daughter. 3 years passed like parallel train tracks, close enough to see but never touching. Nia bloomed. That was the only word for it. Her belly grew round and full, stretching the fabric of the bright dresses she started wearing, colors she'd never allowed herself before. Coral and yellow and soft lavender, like she was claiming joy one outfit at a time. She attended prenatal classes alone, but never lonely, surrounded by other women who understood that family came in different shapes. She painted the nursery herself, choosing a warm cream with hand-stenciled flowers in the corners, each petal a promise to the daughter she was already fiercely protecting. Michaela arrived on a Tuesday morning, all 7 pounds of perfection with a head full of dark curls and eyes that held a startling intensity from the moment she opened them. Nia held her in the hospital room and felt something inside her break open. Not painfully, but beautifully. This tiny human who depended on her completely, who would never wonder if she was wanted. who would grow up knowing that love didn't come with conditions or contracts or cruel rejections whispered over breakfast. Friends emerged from unexpected places, neighbors who became family, a community that wrapped around them like protective arms. Nia's consulting practice grew, fueled by word of mouth and a reputation for integrity that followed her like a shadow. She worked from home while Michaela napped, built presentations during Sesame Street, and somehow managed to make it all look effortless, even when it wasn't. Meanwhile, Ryan Mercer was becoming a ghost. His empire expanded with ruthless efficiency. He acquired 3 companies in 18 months, doubled his net worth. Made the cover of Forbes with a headline that called him the man who can't lose. The photos showed him in a black suit, expression carved from marble. Eyes empty as abandoned buildings. He attended galas alone, stood in corners nursing whiskey while people congratulated him on successes that felt meaningless. He closed deals in restaurants with white tablecloths and dim lighting, signing contracts that added zeros to his accounts and nothing to his life. His penthouse stayed immaculate because he was never there long enough to disturb it. Late at night, Ryan would pull up LinkedIn and type Nia's name into the search bar. Her profile hadn't updated since the day she left. No new position, no location change, no digital breadcrumbs to follow. She'd vanished completely, and he'd let her because the alternative, admitting he'd destroyed the best thing in his life, was too terrifying to face. His assistant noticed the change first, the way he'd zone out in meetings. The shadows under his eyes that expensive concealer couldn't quite hide. Ryan had declined every social invitation for 3 years straight. Ryan Mercer had everything, and he'd never felt more like nothing. Michaela learned to walk in the small apartment Nia had made into a home. She took her first steps between the coffee table and the couch, arms outstretched, face lit with triumph when Nia caught her. By 2 years old, she was a force of nature, all wild curls and endless questions, her favorite dress a riot of colorful flowers that matched the joy she brought into every room. She had Nia's smile, but someone else's bone structure. The strong jawline, the way her brow furrowed when she concentrated on stacking blocks into impossible towers. Nia tried not to see Ryan in her daughter's face. Mostly succeeded. "Mama." "Juice, please," Michaela said one morning, her vocabulary expanding daily in that beautiful, broken way toddlers spoke. She wore her pink bow slightly crooked, having insisted on putting it in herself. "Magic word?" Nia prompted, pouring apple juice into a sippy cup. "Please." Michaela grinned, revealing tiny white teeth. Nia handed over the cup and watched her daughter settle onto the floor with her coloring books, feeling that familiar surge of fierce love that still sometimes caught her off guard. This was enough. This small life they'd built together was more than enough. "Mama?" Michaela looked up from her crayons, her expression suddenly serious. "Where, Daddy?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Nia had known it was coming, had prepared for it, but the reality still made her chest tight. She sat down beside her daughter, choosing her words carefully. "Some families have a mama and a daddy. Some have 2 mamas or 2 daddies. Some have grandparents or aunties. We have us." Nia pulled Michaela into her lap. "We are a team, just us 2, and that makes us special." Michaela considered this with the gravity she applied to everything. "Team?" "Team," Nia confirmed, kissing the top of her curly head. "Okay." Michaela wiggled free and returned to her coloring, the question already forgotten in the way only toddlers could manage. Nia's phone buzzed on the counter. An email from an address she didn't recognize. Subject line reading, "Speaking invitation, Tech Innovators Gala." Her heart skipped. The Tech Innovators Gala was legendary. The kind of event that put consultants on the map, where CEOs and venture capitalists gathered to crown the year's biggest success stories. She opened the email with trembling fingers. Ms. Brooks, we would be honored if you would deliver the keynote address at this year's Tech Innovators Gala. Your work in ethical business transformation has not gone unnoticed, and we believe your voice is exactly what our industry needs to hear. Nia read it 3 times, making sure it was real. This was it. The moment she'd been building towards since she'd walked out of Ryan's penthouse with her dignity and her secret. Proof that she'd not only survived, she'd thrived. Michaela, Nia said, her voice catching with emotion. Mama just got invited to something really important. Michaela looked up, crayon in hand. You pretty, Mama. Thank you, baby girl. Nia smiled through sudden tears. We're going to be just fine. Ryan's assistant mentioned it casually during a routine briefing, sliding the gala invitation across his desk like it was just another networking event. The Tech Innovators Gala is next month. They've requested your attendance. Keynote speaker is someone named Nia Brooks. Ryan's hand froze halfway to his coffee cup. What did you say? Nia Brooks? She's apparently making waves in ethical consulting. The committee thinks having you both there would generate good press for... I'll attend, Ryan said, his voice rough. His assistant blinked, surprised. Ryan had declined every social invitation for 2 years straight. Really? Should I confirm your RSVP? Yes, immediately. After his assistant left, Ryan pulled up his laptop and typed Nia's name into the search engine for the first time in months. Articles populated the screen. Crisis consultant Nia Brooks transforms company culture. The woman teaching Silicon Valley about humanity. A photo of her at a conference, smiling, confident, radiant. She'd moved on, built a life, succeeded without him. Ryan told himself he just wanted to see that she was okay, that his conscience could finally rest, knowing he hadn't destroyed her. But the truth, the one that kept him awake at night, was that he was terrified. Terrified of seeing her again. Terrified she'd look right through him like he didn't exist. Terrified she'd see exactly what he'd become in her absence. A hollow man in an expensive suit. 300 miles away, Nia stood in front of her bedroom mirror, smoothing the fabric of a black evening gown that hugged her curves like liquid midnight. She'd spent more on this dress than she'd ever spent on anything for herself, and it was worth every penny. She looked powerful, untouchable, exactly how she needed to feel walking into a room full of people who might remember her as Ryan Mercer's consultant. Mama pretty. Michaela squealed from the bed, bouncing on the mattress in her pajamas. Thank you, baby. Nia turned, her expression softening. Now remember, you're going to stay with Miss Caroline in the special VIP suite. There's going to be movies and snacks and... Ice cream? Michaela's eyes went wide with hope. Maybe a little ice cream. Nia crouched down, careful not to wrinkle her gown. But you have to promise to be good for Miss Caroline, okay? Promise, Mama. Michaela threw her small arms around Nia's neck. Love you. Love you more, sweet girl. Nia held her daughter close, breathing in the scent of baby shampoo and innocence. Always. The nanny arrived 20 minutes later, and Nia went through the routine one final time. Emergency contacts, bedtime, Michaela's favorite stuffed elephant. As she walked toward the door, she caught her reflection one last time. Strong, successful, survivor. She had no idea Ryan would be there. Had no reason to suspect their carefully constructed parallel lives were about to collide in the most devastating way possible. The ballroom glittered with wealth and ambition, crystal chandeliers casting geometric shadows across a sea of tailored suits and designer gowns. Ryan stood in the back, partially hidden by a marble column, watching the stage like a man witnessing his own reckoning. When they announced her name, the room erupted in applause, but all Ryan could hear was his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Nia walked onto that stage like she owned it, and maybe she did. The black gown moved with her like water, her natural hair styled in elegant curls that caught the spotlight. She was more beautiful than he remembered, but it was more than physical. She radiated something he'd never seen in her before. Certainty, peace, the kind of confidence that came from surviving something difficult and emerging stronger on the other side. Integrity, Nia began, her voice filling the space effortlessly. Isn't what you do when people are watching. It's what you do at 2 a.m. when no one will ever know. It's the choice you make when fear tells you to protect yourself at someone else's expense. Ryan felt the words land like physical blows. Every sentence seemed aimed directly at the fortress he'd built around his heart. I've spent years helping companies rebuild trust after catastrophic failures, Nia continued, moving across the stage with practiced grace. And I've learned something crucial. You can't rebuild trust without first admitting you broke it. You can't demand loyalty while withholding humanity. And you absolutely cannot lead others to a place you've never had the courage to go yourself. The audience was captivated, leaning forward, some taking notes. Ryan just stood frozen, watching the woman he'd pushed away teach a room full of powerful people the lesson he'd been too afraid to learn. When she finished to thunderous applause, Ryan found himself moving through the crowd without conscious thought. Driven by something that felt like desperation wrapped in expensive cologne. He intercepted her near the reception area, his heart hammering so hard he was certain she could hear it. Nia. She turned, and for a fraction of a second, something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or pain. Then it was gone, replaced by polite professionalism. Ryan. Her voice was measured, controlled. I didn't know you'd be here. I didn't know if you'd want me to be. He gestured vaguely toward the stage. You were incredible up there. You look incredible. Nia's expression didn't change. You look the same. The words landed exactly as she'd intended them. Not a compliment, but an observation. He looked the same because he hadn't changed, hadn't grown, hadn't learned anything in the 2 years since he'd broken both their hearts. Ryan opened his mouth to respond, to apologize, to say something that might crack the ice between them, when a sound cut through the elegant murmur of the reception. A child's voice, high and panicked, calling for someone, calling for her. Mama. Nia's entire body went rigid, her eyes widening with something that looked like pure fear. And Ryan watched, confused, as the woman who just commanded a stage with absolute authority suddenly looked terrified of whatever was about to walk through that door. Ryan's mouth opened, words forming that he'd rehearsed 1,000 times in his head. Nia, I need you to know that But the universe had other plans. A small figure burst through the ballroom doors, moving with the reckless speed only toddlers possessed. She wore a dress covered in bright flowers, pink and yellow and coral, a pink bow bobbing in her mass of dark curls as she ran. Behind her, a frantic nanny called out apologies, breathless from chasing the toddler who'd slipped through the cracked doors. But the little girl wasn't listening. She'd spotted something. Someone. Mama. The word echoed through the suddenly silent ballroom, cutting through champagne conversations and networking pleasantries like a knife. Ryan watched, confused, as Nia's face drained of all color. She took an instinctive step forward, arms already reaching. And that's when the little girl crashed into her legs with the force of absolute trust. Tiny arms wrapped around Nia's knees, a curly head pressed against the black fabric of her gown. "Michaela, baby, what are you doing here?" Nia's voice shook, her hands moving to cradle the child protectively. "You're supposed to be upstairs with Miss Caroline." "Scared, Mama. Wanted you." Ryan looked down at the little girl clinging to Nia, and the world tilted sideways. Curly, dark hair, warm brown skin a shade lighter than her mother's. And when she turned her face up to look at Nia, Ryan saw his own eyes staring back at him. The same gray-green, the same shape, the same intensity he saw every morning in his mirror. His heart stopped. Actually stopped. The strong jawline, the way her brow furrowed, the shape of her hands. Every feature was a blend, a perfect mathematical equation of genetics that couldn't be denied or explained away. Time fractured into fragments. The elegant ballroom, the hundreds of watching eyes. The child who was somehow both a stranger and intimately familiar. Nia's protective stance. Her body angled to shield the little girl from his view even as it was far too late. "She's..." Ryan's voice came out strangled, barely a whisper. He couldn't finish the question because finishing it would make it real, would force him to confront the magnitude of what he'd done, what he'd lost, what had been growing and thriving and existing without him for 2 years. Nia lifted her chin, and in her eyes Ryan saw every emotion at once. Fear and fury and fierce maternal protection that would burn down the world before letting him hurt her daughter. She picked Michaela up in one smooth motion, settling the child on her hip like armor, like proof, like the living consequence of his cruelty. When Nia finally spoke, her voice was quiet, but devastatingly clear, cutting through the hushed murmurs of the watching crowd. "She's the child you wanted, Ryan." A pause that felt like falling. "Just not with me." The ballroom erupted in whispers, but Ryan couldn't hear any of it. All he could see was the little girl with his eyes tucked against her mother's shoulder, and the woman who'd built an entire life around protecting their daughter from the man who'd rejected them both before either of them had a chance.